Avatar 2 has to be the best movie I've seen all year. James Cameron really knocked it out of the park, and I gotta say, it's better than the original. So I just left the theater after watching James Cameron's Avatar The Way of Water. And I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review on today's video. And that intro for the video was just me over exaggerating. I gotta have to, I gotta reel y'all in. Y'all just got the hook, and now y'all are here watching the review. And again, no spoilers, but let's get into it. First, let me just establish one thing. I love the first Avatar movie. I was really young when I think the movie came out in 2008, 2009. So I was like 7, 8 years old, and I grew to love Pandora. It was one of the most immersive films I had seen at the time, and I recently rewatched the re-release back in September or October. I forgot. I think it was September. And it was just breathtaking. It was amazing just going back to the world of Pandora. I was excited to meet James Cameron is one of the best filmmakers in my lifetime. Terminator Judgment Day to me is still one of the greatest movies I've seen in my life. It's a movie I've rewatched countless and countless of times. And so obviously I was anticipating this sequel. And the thing that I like more about this is the first time on this YouTube channel that I get to review a James Cameron film. And what did I think about it? Well, I'll just straight up say it's not as good as the first one. So let's say you're not a fan of the first movie. And you're hoping for this movie to change that around. I don't see that happening. I think if you didn't like the first movie, you're more than likely not going to like the second one. So if this is what you were looking for, I apologize, but I don't think this will win you over. I think you would have to be a fan of the first one in order to like this one. But let me get on to my review. This movie was pretty good. It was a pretty good movie. It was really good. The major win of this movie was the visuals. The visuals, every scene in this movie was poster framed worthy, and it was just stunning. But the underwater scenes were amazing. And before I knew the movie was gonna look stunning. Don't get me wrong, but like when I watch it, it's like everything I had seen, Aquaman, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, any movie that had any underwater scenes, they felt like nothing compared to Avatar Way of Water. It felt like there was a genuine camera underwater. With the other movies, now all I keep thinking is, man, this ain't as good as Avatar 2. So Aquaman 2, Namor sequel, whatever they're doing now underwater related, I'm sorry, but there's a new gold standard in Avatar The Way of Water. Boom. And this movie, you need to watch it in theaters. This movie is not worthy of you watching it on Disney Plus and seeing it only at your home on your tiny ass TV. This is a movie that deserves the theatrical experience, whether it's standard or theatrical. Regardless, you gotta be there and the biggest screen you can find, and then just find this immersive nature. And it was beautiful. Every single frame of this movie, again, I would get a poster up and just put it all over my room. All these posters I have, I'm willing to remove them just so that I can have posters of Avatar Way of Water all over it. With that being said, another amazing thing about the movie was Jake Sully. Seeing Jake Sully's family, I do think the characters are far more interesting in this movie than they were in the first movie. There's like some things that I prefer about this movie than I did the last one. And one of those was character motivations. To me, the motivations of these characters felt far more at stake now. And also the characters felt more interesting, including the villain, which is the Colonel that was in the movie. In this movie, his memory is now put into a Navi, so you see him. And I gotta say, as a villain, he's far more better in this one. He's not as complex. He's not like GOAT villain at all, but he was improved, because in the first movie he was just kind of the stereotypical military tough guy villain. In this movie he's still the same, but there's heart to him, and I'm not going to spoil why because the trailers don't show you. And by the way, I gotta admit, this movie, the trailers do not tell you what the story about the movie is. Like literally half the things they gave me in the story, I was like, holy shit, I didn't get this because the trailer didn't show me. And I actually appreciate that from the trailer, because I think I'm just tired of Hollywood constantly spoiling everything in the trailers. Like, bro, just like give me a good trailer and then I'll go to the theater, and then I'll appreciate what you have in store for me, But yeah, Jake Sully's family, entertaining. The Colonel was far improved in this movie. He's still not, again, a great villain. Like, I wouldn't put him at Darth Vader or Joker or Thanos level, but I would say who's a good example? I guess I would use, I don't know, Mysterio. No, that's not a good example. I don't have any good example. I would say Ares from Wonder Woman. I would say if that's standard, where he's an intimidating villain, he's a pretty good force, but he's not like all that well written. He's just kind of basic. But this movie does have a little more heart and humanity towards him. But one thing I do like is that the stakes feel much higher in this movie because you do have Jake Sully and his family. The stakes feel far more higher in this one. I like how the movie establishes very, very early on that the villains, they're evil. They're sky people, they're humans, and they're willing to destroy Pandora for their own selfish reasons. And I love that the movie is able to do that. I love that they did that. So massive shout out with that. James Cameron really knows how to show you a good villain. But with that being said, Jake Sully's family. Now, the movie isn't about Jake and Nakira. I cannot remember her name. Zoe Saldana's Navi. But the movie's not really about them. They are a major importance to the movie, but it's not about them. It's more about their kids, especially the second oldest one. And also the Kate Winslet character. I forgot what the girl's name is. I think her name is Kitty in the movie. The names are pretty forgettable, just like the first movie. That's one thing. The characters aren't as memorable, but they are more interesting in a way where, I like the kids. I like seeing the kids exploring the underwater, exploring the world, and exploring this and exploring that. And I like that, and I love that. And the family dynamic was something that was far more of an improvement in this movie than it was in the last movie. And there was a lot of great moments with them. I really enjoyed it. And now let's talk about the reef people, the light blue people. Now, I thought this movie was going to have some meta commentary on racism, but they didn't really have that. They were called outcasts, but I'm surprised that because the Jake Sully Navi, they're dark blue, but the reef people, they're like light blue, but they also have like a fin rather than like a normal tail. And I did like how the movie did go into the outcast thing, although it didn't really go deep into it. So if you're expecting this deep exploration about people treating others differently based on how they look, you really don't get that much. You just kind of get it quickly a couple of times and then that's it. But I did like the reef people. They were interesting. There's a love relationship between Jake's second oldest son with one of the reef people's daughter, and I like that. The reef people weren't all that interesting, but they were more there to establish the underwater lore, what it's like to go underwater. So that was pretty important for them. But yeah, the underwater stuff, amazing, beautiful. Jake Sully's family dynamic, great, amazing. The action is breathtaking. Trust me, the last 40 minutes of this movie, the action is just peak James Cameron. It was amazing. The stakes were high. And again, the stakes felt even higher in this one. Like you thought the last one was high. This one was even higher, especially with the kids. And they even show you the consequences of war. And that's what I love about the movie, because it's Jake Sully's fear of going back into war, especially now that he has a family. He's scared. He's concerned about the safety of his kids. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, especially fathers, mothers. And I love that. And really, this is a story about a family, And I love that you believe they're a family. Every time they talk to each other, they treat, especially the kids, the way they bond with one another, it feels like these actors genuinely were a family in some way. And I love that. And again, the characters are more interesting and all that. And overall, the movie is solid. But now let me get into the negatives. Now, the negative of this movie, and this is the major, major negative, and it's the major reason why I don't think this movie is as good as the first one. The major negative I have is this movie is way too long. The first movie, I thought the runtime was perfect. I thought the runtime made sense from beginning to end. This movie, they should have cut out 40 minutes. And I know y'all are like, 40 minutes? God damn. Sorry, but there was moments in this movie where I was bored. And the last thing a movie needs to do is bore the audience. And I'm sorry, halfway through this movie, I was like, I don't think I'm going to make it. And by the way, I'm somebody who loves Zack Snyder's Justice League. That's a 4-hour film. I've seen Endgame in the theaters multiple times. That was 3 hours. The Batman, I love the Batman. And that movie's nearly 3 hours. Eternals, I love that movie. And that movie is nearly 3 hours. Like, I'm somebody who's seen movies that are 3 hours multiple times. The Godfather movies, I think both part 1 and part 2. I can't remember how long part 3 is. I haven't rewatched that movie recently, but I've seen a lot of movies that are over that runtime. So if there's anyone that can talk about this, I think it's me. And to me, the runtime isn't justified. I'm sorry, but this runtime just, it really, because when I left the theater, I wasn't thinking amazing, amazing, amazing. What I was thinking is, God damn, I could have been at home at like 30 minutes ago. I was like, God damn, this movie did not need to be 3 hours. This movie absolutely, somebody needs to manage James Cameron. I think James Cameron's one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, but somebody needs to go in there and say, James, I love what you're doing, but your movies cannot be this long. They cannot be this long. And while the characters were interesting, they weren't interesting enough to carry a 3-hour film. Like with Zack Snyder's Justice League, you have Ben Affleck's Batman, Henry Cavill's Superman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, all these characters. And it's kind of a fast-paced movie where you're constantly seeing different characters, different stories. While in this one, you have two stories. And for like 30 minutes in the middle of the movie, it's almost like they forgot about the story and we're focusing on the underwater stuff, which is beautiful, by the way. But you have a story to tell. And I remember when we cut back to the Colonel, all I kept thinking is, oh, fuck, I forgot we were here to watch that story. And another issue, and I know this is going to sound like a spoiler, it's not, but I'm going to be as vague as possible, but this movie's story that they set up in the beginning doesn't end. You know, like the movie has a narrative and it ends, but the story they tell you from the beginning to the end, it doesn't end. They kind of sequel bait you. And I'm not saying it's going to leave off on a cliffhanger. It's not a cliffhanger, but it is sequel baiting heavily. And that's one issue I have. I'm fine if you sequel bait, but your sequel bait can't change your movie. It can't affect it to a way where it feels distracting. The first movie, that's one thing I love. It establishes a story early on, and then by the end of it, it ends that story. Boom, there, the movie's done, over. You can go home, enjoy the movie, maybe rewatch it. But this movie, the story is overly long, and it also doesn't end. So, as much as I like this movie, it's a really good movie. The movie was overly long. The movie was way too long, and the story just didn't end. You know, this movie sequel baited too much. Avatar, no wonder they're making these back-to-back movies, right? And I was baffled because I'm like, this is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, James Cameron. And I feel like one thing filmmakers need to always understand is finish off your story, the one you established in the beginning. There's some exceptions, you know, Empire Strikes Back. Although that movie was really all about Darth Vader defeating Luke Skywalker. Let's not deny it. That is what it's about, the Empire Striking Back and showing Luke Skywalker, hey, you may be powerful, but you're not perfect. But still, this movie, I don't know why it was too long. And that was ultimately the detriment of this film. That was ultimately what caused me to not think this movie is as good as the first one. And I think one thing I love about the first one is exploring this different world, going into a world you've never seen. In the second movie, you already have that. So what do? You go underwater. I didn't find that as interesting. It was visually far more beautiful watching Pandora underwater, but it just wasn't as interesting as the first movie, right? So there's things I like about this movie more than the first one. The villain I thought was an improvement. The Colonel, you know. Jake Sully was more interesting. I thought the family dynamic was beautiful. But the runtime and the movie not ending, or the story not ending, and not having a satisfying conclusion, kind of just leaves you salty about it. It kind of leaves you in a position where you're like, oh, I guess I came here to watch people swim. And it's a good movie. The CGI is chef's kiss. But at the end of the day, this movie is not perfect. It's a solid movie. It's a good movie. But another issue about this movie is the first movie I can go rewatch in theaters multiple times. When I rewatched it the first time in September, all I kept thinking was, hey, I want to come back the next weekend. With this movie, however, so I went with somebody to watch this movie, and what I told this person was, I'm probably going to wait for this movie to come out on Disney Plus because I'm not going to go back in that theater for 3 hours, all right? Like, I'm sorry, but 3 hours is way too much. And I think after the Batman, I thought the Batman was a really good movie, but that movie should have cut out 20 minutes. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, that movie should have cut out 20 minutes. After all these movies that came out this year that were so long, I feel like Hollywood needs to stop its obsession of trying to get the 2 hour and 30 minute mark. I know some movies need that runtime, but not every movie, man. And Avatar Way of Water definitely needed a cut. And I saw some people talking about, is James Cameron going to release an extended cut? Trust me, I'm probably never going to watch the extended cut. The only way I'll see those extended scenes is if I go on YouTube and just search up those specific scenes. Kind of like what I did with the first movie. But yeah, and the thing is, the difference between this version of an extended cut and the first movie is, in the first movie, that extended cut more serves to show you more of Jake Sully's backstory. In this one, however, I just don't see where the extra scenes were. I felt like there's no way this movie had deleted scenes. But overall, I had a fun time. I enjoyed it. Who do I recommend this movie to? I recommend this to people who are really into visuals, VFX, and all these kinds of people that are into the technical stuff. If you're into that kind of stuff, you're gonna love this movie. If you love the first, if you love the first movie, you're gonna love this one. But and I guess if you're a family, you could take your kids to this. Although I will tell you, you're probably, depending on how young your kids are, you're probably gonna have to take them out, because I don't think they'll be able to sit through the full 3 hours. But overall, the people who probably aren't going to watch it like this movie is the people who didn't like the first one, and the people who aren't able to sit through 2 hour and 30-minute movies. And look, there are movies that do justify its runtime. Infinity War, Endgame, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I think there's a lot of movies that do have a long runtime, but it fits. But what you have to do with that runtime is you have to use up every hour and use it to your advantage. And with Avatar Way of Water, there's just, like, all I kept thinking was 40 minutes of this movie needed to be removed. But still, overall, I think the movie's a win. I hope that the movie does well in the box office. But whatever you think, you guys let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree, disagree? Have you seen the movie? Have you not? Whatever it is, let us know in the comment section down below. And yeah, I'll probably do a spoiler discussion maybe on Monday. So be on the lookout for that. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace.